Absolutely. So, especially with AI, people are calling it the next biggest change since the Industrial Revolution, or 10 to 20 times greater than the Revolution or the internet age that dawned in the 2000s. But really, it's the cat's out of the bag. There's no putting it back. It's going to transform every industry. But you touch on something really important. I think two of the industries in which it'll transform the most are education and healthcare. And around the world, especially in areas where there's lack of access to education or healthcare, AI has the potential to really change the game in many ways. Now, of course, there will be challenges. It won't be perfect, and but you see upheavals in these areas already due to AI. Like education, there's a huge across universities. It's like, where should we allow the use of AI tools? Where should we not allow the use? How do you learn if you're just using AI, or can you learn better with AI? They're all questions that we're figuring out the nuances of at this time. And so I think those are two areas that will be incredibly transformed, but every industry will change tremendously over the next decade due to AI.
Hello, my name is John Brink, and we are podcasting on the Brink from downtown Prince George, British Columbia, Canada. And for all those people watching us from around the world, they say, okay, we know where Canada is, in British Columbia on the West Coast, right? Right. And then there is a big city called Vancouver. And where are you, John, relating to Vancouver? Well, John being me is saying we are in Prince George, which is 500 miles north of Vancouver, and for our European friends, 800 kilometers, and which puts us in the center of British Columbia, north-south, east-west, big province. And Prince George, smaller community, about 80,000 people, lots of forest, lots of lakes around us. Within 50 miles, we have 100 lakes. There are lots of other friends, black bears, grizzly bears, caribou, deer, foxes, wolves. We call it paradise. Today we have a very, very interesting guest, amazing background in regards to well-being and a lot of other things related to that, direct and indirect. His name is Dr. Bhargav Patel. And can I call you just Dr. Patel, Bhargav?
Yes, of course.
Okay, and so Dr. Patel has an amazing background. He is a physician, leader, and interdisciplinary innovator working on the forefront of healthcare transformation and powered clinical tools, science-based wellness. Dr. Patel is a medical doctor, has a master's of business administration. He is a physician, obviously, an innovator, an author, and an entrepreneur, and all in one package. He has studied on all the major universities for all his degrees, and he will share all of that with us. Dr. Patel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, John.
So tell us about, your bio is not only interesting from a medical perspective or well-being perspective, but it's innovative. And the first impression I have is innovative in a new direction that we see the well-being, longevity, and awareness and diet. I see vegan, very important. My wife is a vegetarian, and I'm probably now, not always have been, but I'm probably progressed from 80-20 to 90-10 vegan. And so all of this stuff, very, very interesting and taking on a whole new direction. So I'm very excited, and I'm sure so are the millions of people watching us from around the world, is about us sharing this hour with you. So tell us about your background and then your studies that took you through all those major universities throughout North America. Tell us all about it, how it all started. You were, and I'm just looking for You took psychiatry at Brown University and then became a medical doctor and worked some of these other universities as well. And you will be telling us, sharing that with us. So tell us all about your background, Dr. Patel, and then we'll take it forward.
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey started, and it's gone across a lot of different places because I've been passionate about a lot of different things. So it started with undergraduate. Well, I can start even before that, actually. So I did high school in Georgia, and then I followed that up with undergraduate at Vanderbilt, where I majored actually in religious studies and philosophy. Decided to explore something new, and then followed that up with medical school at Medical College of Georgia, where I also did my general psychiatry residency, and then I followed that up with a Child and Adolescent Psychiatry and Research Fellowship at Brown University. So I've been all across the East Coast and explored many different topics and things. Along with that, I also did my MBA at the University of Arizona in healthcare administration. And so that's my academic background, and I continue to work in a lot of different areas today.
And then, in addition to that, you became an author and you're working on a book, Trauma Transformed, exploring trauma. And you can tell us a bit about that. I'm also an author, even for somebody like you, and certainly for somebody like me, becoming an author is not easy. and so, and obviously the topics that you have are very, very, very current topics, and including in that also, and we'll talk about that more, as to how does artificial intelligence or AI affect the medical profession, but also for us as individuals or people that are not directly but will be directly and indirectly involved in AI. How did all so tell us about your book.
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is named Trauma Transformed. It's not published yet. It's probably coming out later this year. And the book essentially the journey started 4 or 5 years ago. Didn't realize how long it would take to write a full book and how much effort actually goes into it. Having written several textbook chapters and other things before, I was like, oh, it's just like 10 of those. But it's a whole nother beast to write a book, as I'm sure you know with the books you've written. So it's a whole different experience. But the purpose of the book was to highlight the knowledge behind trauma, resilience, PTSD. I've done a lot of work with veterans and people with PTSD. So it was to highlight that knowledge for the general public, not in a super academic way, but a way that translated down that academic knowledge and scientific literature for the general public. And so that's what we focused on in that book. I have two other co-authors, and the the goal was to give the general public an easy to access resource on understanding trauma and recovery.
And this is very, very important because your knowledge and your background has been academic substantially. How can you then? Uh, I always say about me, I'm a storyteller. That's what I do. And that's what I try to do in my books so that people, for me, it's easy because that's who I am. Then I relate to complicated things in life and easier ones in life that directly relate to me and my experience. One of the books that I wrote, my fourth one actually, that I wrote is this one, Living Young, Dying Old. And that's a picture of me actually. I'm 85 years young, and it's all about of quality of life. I'm also very active physically as well as mentally, actually, considering we are one of the most successful podcasters in Western Canada, likely, and have nearly 1 million subscribers on YouTube. But this is a picture of me as a bodybuilder, and I'm the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America. And so and so so that part has become important to me. And then the other part that, again, give you just a little bit of me. I was born, as I already said, in 1940 in northeastern Holland. about 10 minutes from the border with Germany. My mom and dad were married in 1938. And they were in love, and my dad had a career in a lumber company in Holland, and they had rented this beautiful house. Very quickly, they had 2 kids, a boy and a girl, and then in 1940, my mom was pregnant with me, and then the whole world changed. When Adolf Hitler decided that Poland should be part of Germany, that's where it started, and then in early 1940, it became obvious that he likely would invade the rest of Western Europe and in particular Holland. So my dad was called into the Dutch army in April of 1940, and for 5 years they would not know if he was dead or alive. The last time that he was seen is at the bombing of Rotterdam, and that killed thousands of people. And so my mom then being pregnant with me, and then having the brother and sister, had to go through the next 5 years on her own, and things were very, very challenging. For me, I still remember from 3.5 years old, saw far too much that we should not have seen. Things got very, very tough, and as you know, the Allied forces landed in Normandy in the summer of 1944, pushed their way through France. The Canadians pushed their way through France, then Belgium, and the western part of Holland, and we lived in the northeastern part. By then, things got very, very rough, and we saw far too much of the things that we should not have seen. And still, I'm still affected by that even now with PTSD, and you're so familiar with all of that. Still very much part of my life, the inner child. I got counseling for that in my 50s, actually. Didn't even know what that meant. Extremely emotional. And so all those kind of things. And then, so we got liberated by the Canadian Army on April the 12th, 1945. It made such an impression on me that I knew from that point forward, as I grew up, I would go to the land of my heroes, Canada. And I did. And when I was 24 years old. And then, academically, I was not a success story. I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times. And they said, what are we going to do with this guy? And my parents were beautiful people, and some people suggested, send him to the mentally challenged school. They said, no, we're not going to do that. So at 12.5 years old, they said, well, he should go. I liked lumber. My grandfather was a master carpenter. My dad worked in lumber. And so send him to, he had a friend there at a furniture factory, send him to the furniture factory, make him a furniture maker. So at 12.5 years old, I became a laborer working towards becoming a furniture maker. Kids can be very hard on each other. The friends that I had at grade 7, and the teachers even that were in my earlier years, I was known as the one that really didn't have a good brain, was too dumb, too stupid, blah, blah, all those mean things. And then friends, when I became a laborer, all of a sudden was looked at as I was a laborer. All the other fellas and girls went up to high schools, colleges, then universities, and I was a laborer. I'm proud of that today. It served me well. And so when I then decided finally I was drafted into the Dutch Army. It was mandatory at the time that I was 18 for 2 years, and then worked in the forest industry in Holland for 2 years, and then came to Canada when I was 24. And so I wanted to start with nothing to prove to me that I was just as smart as all the other ones. Not smarter than, but just as smart. So I wanted to start with nothing. So I had, when I left Holland, I had a suitcase, I had 3 books, 2 sets of clothes, and very little money. I flew into Montreal, couldn't speak the language, didn't know a soul, didn't have a job, and then took the train across Canada, 4 days, 5 nights. I'm like, God, that is a long way. And so when I landed, I knew I wanted to build a lumber mill. So when I came to Vancouver, went to the immigration office, couldn't speak English, but fortunately there was a German fellow, I could speak some German. I told him I wanted to build a lumber mill. He said, go to Prince George. That's where they're building lumber mills now. As I'm sitting here still in Prince George 60 years later, I still see where the Greyhound station landed, came off the bus with my suitcase, July of 1965. Came out the bus with the suitcase, 3 books, 2 sets of clothes. I counted my money at least 3 times. I had exactly $25.47. But I had lots of attitude. I've always, through all the challenges, I lived in my own world, and I was always positive. And then the other one is I had this passion of no matter what I do, I gave it 125%. I always did it. And work ethic, even still today, I work harder than anybody, even at 85, 2 months from now. I still get up at 5:30 in the morning. I always make my bed, and I always think I'm late. And so, yes, I did build my lumber mill actually exactly 50 years ago, July of 1975. I started a company that made lumber, and I still do that now 50 years later, and a number of other companies. And so, and then, what changed my life, and I'm giving you this background because it is so important in the context of a lot of things that you are doing and have done. I think it may be helpful for the people watching us from around the world, because my situation is not unique, but what it does say is that everything is possible. And so what changed my life in a way is at one point, and after I was already here for 32 years, and I walked into a bookstore and I picked up a book. I still have the book. And I picked it up, and the book's title is Driven to Distraction. I don't know why I picked it up. I opened the book. It was written by Dr. Edward Hollowell, medical doctor, professor, recognized around the world for somebody in particular knowledgeable about ADHD and dyslexia, has written 18 books, and 5 of them on ADHD issues. And so when I had never even heard of ADHD, and I said, oh my God, that's me. And I wrote in the book, actually here, January 1997, when I was here already for 32 years, and I wrote it in Dutch because I was ashamed of it, because it implied that it is a mental disorder. And obviously, with somebody that is building companies already at that time, everybody said, oh, you're so successful. And if I go to the bank and say I want to borrow a couple of $1 million to build another mill, another business there, then I give them my bio, and I said, oh yeah, by the way, I also have ADHD. And they would say, okay, well, have a nice day, because it's implied that it's a mental disorder. And so the more I found out about it, the more I read, the more I checked out on Google and other places, I came to the conclusion that it took me 5 years after I picked up the book, before I would go to my doc that delivered our 2 daughters, was a personal friend, and that was in 1962. I walked into his office and he said, hey, John, why are you here? I said, I think I got ADHD. And we checked it out. I do. And so by then, I was 62 years old. From the time that I left school at 12 and a half years old, it took 50 years of wondering, who am I? And it took all that time until when I read the book and I checked it out, that I knew, then it became clear. And so what I say now, and I've written a book about that as well, ADHD Unlocked, is saying that it's a superpower. And so, so it changed my life. And, but I just want to kind of give you some of that background, because it relates so many ways to the things that you're doing, is that, and then the other part that I like to add to it, how about health and fitness? Well, I'm very fortunate. My wife Sharon, she is, very much into health and fitness. Is is a vegan, and I didn't listen as well to her as I could. I was not overly bad in terms of the things that I ate, but not as good as I could have been until in 2008. When I was already 68 years old, I had a case of diverticulitis, and it was very painful. And for those people that are watching us that do not know, you're the doctor, I'm not the doctor, but what I usually say, if you got pain on your right side, it could be appendix for one. If you have it on the left side, it could be diverticulitis. And mine breached, and I waited too long. And after I got the operation in 2008, the doc said to me the following morning, they took out 20 centimeters of my colon. They said, you came this close. And then I knew I had to change my life. I started the following year after I recovered from this, I started to become much more vegan, and became first 80-20, now I'm 90-10, I would say. And at the same time, I went to the gym, and I knew that I had been like others. They say, at the end of the year, we're going to do this, that, and the other thing, and this, and I'm going to get a membership to the gym. And then 2 weeks later, can find 100 reasons why we're too busy to go to the gym. Well, I didn't do that. I knew then I had to be much more careful about my diet and about health and fitness. And so I started working with a trainer. After about 5 years, 6 years, in 2017, somebody came up to us and said, hey, John, have you ever thought about competing? I said, me? Really? Yeah, I was nearly 70 then, or into my 70s already. And I said, well, why not? So I competed bodybuilding, and then came in second bodybuilding, third in physique in northern BC, same in the province of British Columbia, then nationally, and then complied or also became able to go to the Arnolds. And then COVID came, and so now again I'm training for the Arnolds. Picture here is me, is fitness, still going to the gym, still am the oldest competitive bodybuilder in North America, but it's all about longevity and quality of life in my mind, and that's very, very important, mentally, physically. And so that kind of is the background of my life that fits in a lot of ways into what I believe you specialize in.
Yeah, I truly want to say that story is an inspiration. It's truly incredible from beginning to end to me, and I'm sure to millions of viewers around the world. That it's a story of resilience, a story of overcoming challenge, a story of strength, and a story of overcoming things like ADHD, or even seeing the superpowers of something like ADHD. And so there's so many things I can speak to there, including the vegan component, and I'm sure we'll chat about all of it. But truly, ADHD, sometimes when people ask me why I do so many different things, I also joke that it's my ADHD, because uh, I have a mild version of ADHD where I'm interested in doing many things and I can't stay focused on one thing all day, but it really is a superpower. And this, don't quote me on the exact numbers, but there was a study of what we call the dopamine transporter gene. The dopamine is very involved in ADHD. And if you look, so the original humans came from Africa and migrated outwards. And the further you get from Africa, the higher the rates of that dopamine transporter gene. So that almost ADHD type traits lead to more and more adventure seeking, more and more curiosity, more and more desire to learn or explore. And so that's one thing we see, that if anything can be a superpower when understood and used rightly. So I think you exemplify that in so many ways.
Now, the other part about it, Doc, which is interesting, Dr. Hollowell, interesting person, 18 books, and very well known globally in a way, is that he was on my podcast, and you my podcast number 445. And so, but he was on my podcast 203. and so it's so, and it was such a unique conversation to get him on my podcast. And so and some of the things that I had found out, and I suggested to him, he's the expert, obviously, I have lived it, that I thought that probably the frequency of occurrence is likely the same between males and females, although females present it different than males, and you would be an expert in that field as well. And then the other part, I believed, from all the things that I had learned up to that point, that at least 20% of the population likely has ADHD. He said, no, John, at least 25%. And I agree with them. The other thing that I found is that, coming from the ground up and now having many different companies, and it's not about John's success, but just giving an illustration, 10 different companies. I'm on many boards and many organizations. And I have come to the conclusion, having met many CEOs and successful entrepreneurs, that I believe that probably 50% of them are ADHD. Of the successful ones, is the imperative here, is that he said, no, John, probably 75%. I agree with that. And so I urge for the people watching us to look at my podcast number 203, and we will show it on this section of a very small picture of it, that when we do a podcast with Dr. Hollywell, that may be very helpful for other people in the world, so that it is not a liability. It can well be a benefit, and it is in many, many cases. And I have an obligation, from my perspective, to share that with other people in the world, because it is maybe between 25 and 30% of the population in areas of neurodiversity issues, ADHD, and other issues are directly or indirectly affected by it to different levels. And I believe that is globally, and that's why it is so important from my perspective and my way to speak about it, and to get amazing guests, I say that respectfully, like yourself, Dr. Patel, to also share your experience, and your views on it are so very, very important.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I think that's very true. In my experience with very successful people, they have ADHD at much higher rates, I'd say, than the general population, and it certainly could be up to 75%. And it's because some of the traits of ADHD lead to adventure seeking, novelty seeking, curiosity, all things that we need in our leaders, people that are going to try new things. If you're going to be an entrepreneur, you have to have the ability to take certain risks and think outside the box and be curious. So those traits are primed for success in our world today. And on one end of the spectrum, and ADHD is a spectrum, for example. So it's a spectrum of a trait, as we call. And so when you go from like 0% to 100% of that trait, you have varying severity of ADHD. And so depending on where someone falls in the spectrum, it can be very beneficial. Of course, when it gets to its very extremes, it's very debilitating for certain people. And like those are the cases where they potentially need medication or other help when it's in the furthest extreme. But otherwise, in the middle of the spectrum, it can be an incredibly useful tool, or an incredibly useful trait. So just like anything else, there's a balance to it. There's like the right amount for it, and it can be incredibly useful.
The amazing thing about it, Dr. Patel, is that since, for me, 10, 15 years ago, people didn't even speak about it. Generally speaking, it was not even known, other than, so it is relatively recently that it has become more known, and it is likely because of people like ourselves that are speaking about that as one portion of neurodiversity issues that we may be affected by or benefit by it, for that matter. But the most important part about it is to see if I can just be helpful to some or even one or two people that can change their life because everything is possible. Look at it in terms of beneficial. I have people say to me, how do you do all these things that you're doing? You're writing 5 books, you're working on another 6 or 7, nearly 1 million viewers on YouTube on podcasting, and then I'm a speaker and a presenter in demand and all of that kind of stuff. And even then still, I have lots of energy. How do you do it? I say it's ADHD. That's how I do it.
Absolutely. And I use the same thing. I say it's my ADHD that allows me to do all these different things.
I love it. So tell us more about you as you went through this, through all your studies, and then started looking at, what I see in your bio is that being vegan and diet is so critically important. So what I usually do, and I'm just going to share that with you and for your views and comments, is that at least now, I was a late starter. Likely after I was diagnosed at 62, my life changed. So the message for that is important, that anything is possible at any age. Don't say, I can't do this, I can't. Everything is possible at any age. So the other part about it is that what I do now is I try to sleep at least 7 to 9 hours a night is important to me. When I get up, every morning I drink 10 ounces of water before I do anything else. I believe that's, at least it makes you feel good, and I believe that is good for me. I have a very balanced diet. Breakfast, I usually have 3 boiled eggs or 4 and an avocado, a half one or one other one. I usually go to the gym. If I go to the gym, then I usually go at 11 o'clock, fits me better for the rest of my schedule. And then I have a double protein drink in the gym, very, very healthy, very, very fitness. That is my lunch. And then at the latter part, I usually work till about 6 o'clock. At around that time, I go home. And then I have add protein to what I do, either salads with chicken or fish or something like that. That gives me a solid meal. And then I usually go to bed at around 9:30, 9 to 9:30, sometimes quarter to 10, but that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think there's many different healthy diets out there. I don't think there's one perfect or
Yeah.
healthy diet. I think it's about being mindful of your diet and what you're putting in your body on a micronutrient level, on a micronutrient level, and what makes you feel good. And so there's no one right diet, but there are healthier diets. And so being conscious of how you're combining things can certainly lead to a big difference in your health, as I'm sure you've experienced as you've changed your diet
Yes.
over time.
Yes. So how do you see things go forward? I believe the educational system is one, and not only talking about ADHD, but we are now since I was born in 1940, obviously the first transition was, coming back to stability as a family. That was a challenge for us because my dad did come back. I always remember when he came back after the liberation in 1945. I was already 5 years old. Who is this guy? I don't even know him. So he had a helmet, and in that helmet, the bullet hole had gone through it from one end to the other, barely missed his brain by a fraction of an inch. But he was never the same again. Alcohol became an issue, and not being able to express himself likely were challenges, as many others were that had seen far too much, and it affected our lives. And I say it makes us appreciate North America in particular, where we have democratic rule, and not until you have been and gone through it, and we see it now on a daily basis, there is nothing more important than peace for family stability and success. And I watched Eastern Europe and obviously the Ukraine and then the Middle East and all those things. And I fly around a lot in business. And every time I do, I sit by the window seat and I look outside in North America. I do a lot of business in the United States as well as in Canada. I look at the window and I say, it's paradise. It's paradise. And that's what I say virtually every day. So that part is very, very important, the land of opportunity.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And you with your personal experiences having been through those things, it really gives you a perspective that many people maybe who grew up here and never really went outside of it don't have because they haven't experienced the contrast. I think it's the stability and the relative peace of the region is an incredible blessing that allows the businesses, the world, the people's health, all these things to flourish. And
Exactly.
so that's incredibly true, and I'm very sorry for what happened to your dad. That he was probably struggling with PTSD, and that's what people describe. Like they come back changed and have never been the same, and
But
probably
we didn't understand that at the time. So
yeah,
PTSD to me was something that same as ADHD and all the other things. So that's the other part that I believe is important for you to give your perspective of it, is that what I saw from that transition, it was not just a question of the war is over, now everything goes back to normal. No, that's not the case. It may take generations. Now, the other part, obviously, that was had such an amazing impact on me, obviously, is meeting the Canadians that liberated us. We couldn't speak the language, but
yeah,
we did. And every morning we would go to the schoolyards behind our house and they would feed us bread with butter and cheese. And the butter and cheese was bigger than the bread. And they were our heroes. And so
yeah,
it formed that idea of, to me, that was the dream. As I grew up, I would go to Canada. Then coming here, I want to start with nothing, because to prove to me that I was just as bright as anybody else, it was not as had happened many, many times before, failing in school or at least, being looked at that way. John is again a problem, he can't learn, is probably not bright enough, blah, 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 and will never amount to anything. All those kind of comments were very commonplace then. So I had to go here, and I did go here. I loved it, enjoyed it. Had to start with nothing, which I did, and then from there on in, the other things that affected my life is, as it did all of us, is early '80s computers had an
mhm,
immense impact, starting with, as you well know, even in your life, you've gone through all of that, and now it's a mainstay of what we do, and going beyond that and add to that now. And for me, even at 85, I'm still very, very interested in all the things that are happening. Obviously, I'm doing that on podcasting at 85. I'm sure I'm one of the oldest one, probably globally, that not necessarily globally, but certainly in North America, that is very active in podcasting. Is that the next transition is AI, and AI, artificial intelligence, is at some point people thought, well, it has to go back into the bottle because all of a sudden we don't have control. Well, it's far beyond that now. It will never go there, but it will have something, an impact like computers did, if not more so. And then that also means, in my mind, and it's very much of some of the things that you do, or a lot of things that you do, it will change the way we are taught from the time that we are young, as to how do we go right from the time of being in the small little schools to the schooling system, right up to high schools, colleges, university. All of this is has to change from what we are doing now to what it will be as we go forward.
absolutely. So, especially with AI, people are calling it the next biggest change since the Industrial Revolution, or 10 to 20 times greater than the Industrial Revolution, or the internet age that dawned in the 2000s. But really, it's the cat's out of the bag. There's no putting it back. It's going to transform every industry. But you touch on something really important. I think two of the industries in which it'll transform the most are education and healthcare. And around the world, especially in areas where there's lack of access to education or healthcare, AI has the potential to really change the game in many ways. Now, of course, there will be challenges. It won't be perfect, and but you see upheavals in these areas already due to AI. Like education, there's a huge across universities. It's like, where should we allow the use of AI tools? Where should we not allow the use? How do you learn if you're just using AI, or can you learn better with AI? They're all questions that we're figuring out the nuances of at this time. And so I think those are two areas that will be incredibly transformed, but every industry will change tremendously over the next decade due to AI.
And then the other part about it, doctor, is that using myself as an example, I grew up in northeastern Holland. And the interesting part about Holland is that where I grew up is mainly farming related land below sea level in a lot of cases. And then we speak a dialect that is not usually understood by people in the rest of Holland. And it's usually it is Spanish is a beautiful flowing language, and so is French, but not a dialect necessarily. But I loved to speak dialect, and I was not very good at speaking High Dutch because I didn't spend enough time in school where they did speak High Dutch, and then I had to kind of learn to speak High Dutch when I got into the Air Force for 2 years. And I barely got that part under control. And then I went to the United to Canada. I had to learn to speak English, and so that was a transition. And then so a little bit tongue in cheek in my situation, you can relate to that. Is that in a lot of the presentations that I do, people ask me about. I talk about about ADHD and other things that I've gone through, including the inner child and blah, 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 and then schooling, or the lack thereof, if you wish, is saying that, do you have bad feelings about failing grade 7 3 times? I said, yeah, I do, actually, still do, actually. I should have left earlier, just tongue in cheek, more or less. The point that I'm making did not stop me from becoming on my own already. And if you ask me the question, is that what were the 3 books you took with you from Holland? Is that the books that they already kind of form the base as to where I wanted to go, what I wanted to do. Is the one book was Management by Drucker in Dutch, and the other book was a book on logical thinking as a part of the topic, and the other book was about Canada. So, but already at a very early age, I had the hunger of listening to people that had been, in my mind, talking about business in particular, but also about life in general, had been immensely successful. I would go all over the place to listen to them. It gave me that inspiration right up to the time that I was in my early 20s. But it became part of my education instead of, or in lieu of, the other things that I learned through, the even becoming at 12 and a half years working in a furniture factory as a laborer served me well in the rest of my life. Is a lot of things that I can do in the lumber industry, which makes me uniquely different. But the foundation was that period of finding my passion as to that I wanted to make my life as a business person, entrepreneurial in the lumber industry for one, and I was very successful, but now I do other things as well. But ADHD, the difference has been that I'm constantly learning. I have an interest in all the things that I do, including the books and obviously including podcasting.
Yeah. I mean, your story is an incredible inspiration, and it really highlights that if you want to do something, you can do it regardless of what your background is, regardless of what your situation is. If you set yourself up and you put in the effort and you're resilient and through it and you persevere, you can accomplish literally anything. You became a bodybuilder after 60. Like, it's an incredible accomplishment where often people at that age are being like, okay, I can't do this, I can't climb stairs, I can't do that. They're telling themselves they can't do all these things, but you literally became a bodybuilder after 60. So you can do pretty much anything that you set your mind to and that you set yourself up for.
And at 86, I intend to be at the Arnold's and being competitive. So most of the ones that I had to compete with is the 50-year and older. You could be my kids, but even then, I'm quite successful. And so, and that and it also lays precisely at the point that you were making, is that it becomes a mindset, and then the other part that I believe is that it becomes. That's why I wrote this book as being an inspiration to others. That is me in my 80s, and that's how I look now. And after this podcast, I'm going to be at the gym doing training with my trainer, and that has worked with me for a number of years now, and we're not just sitting around and pedaling around or looking at our cell phones. No, I'm there to work. And the weights that I do and all the other things is heavy stuff that I do. I can compete with anyone that is in the 30s or 40s. And it is just saying everything is possible.
Absolutely.
Now, the other part that I was going to mention to you, and then I want you like to. The last book that I wrote is this one, and
Mm.
it's about communication skills that are critically important, and that's why I wrote this book. It's about in all the things that we do in life, between diet, the fitness, obviously,
Mm.
and mentally, is that to be good communicators is not being taught very well either in the schooling system or anywhere else. And I found over the years, even with my friends that are senior CEOs and companies, that they really are not good communicators. And I believe that there is lots of areas for improvement, but also I wrote it for the purposes of that, to be an inspiration, for others, that if you become a good communicator, then that will help you in your personal relationships. It will help you in seeking a career, and if you so wish, to become an entrepreneur. But the other part, very importantly, is it gives you confidence, and that part again is very, very important in life.
Definitely. I think communication skills are incredibly important and something I worked on when I was younger too. No one, I mean, some people are just born naturally talented with communication skills, but even that's not just natural. They observe people, they had good role models, they had good examples, and they developed those skills. So it is a skill. It's not something you're good at or bad at. You can definitely learn it, like many other things in life. And your communication skills help in every area of your life. Like you mentioned, it can change how your personal relationships go. It can change your success in life. It can change so many things that it's 100% worth putting in your time to build your communication skills.
In all fairness, I should suggest that I was not good at communication skills either. I didn't have the confidence until 1989, when a friend said, "Hey, John, you should come with me to Toastmasters." I said, "What is Toastmasters?" He said, "Well, it's about communication skills." And I said, "Are they going to ask me anything?" He said, "No, you just sit there and you watch. And if you like it, you come back. And if not, then you don't." So I said, "Okay." So I went down there, and then halfway through the meeting, somebody said, "Hey, John, tell us all about you." And I said, "Oh my God, I'll never go back here." But I did. And I stayed there for 10 years and became a DTM, a Distinguished Toastmaster. And for those people watching us from around the world, Toastmasters is, contrary to what some people may think, it's not about becoming a good communicator. First and foremost, you must become a good listener. And then you must be able to get to the point of standing on your feet and articulating questions into answers that are thoughtful and well balanced, which is a challenge and a lot to do. And then, in addition to that, it will give you confidence, and then at the same time it gives you then presentation skills that then will become very, very helpful. But the other parts that it will give you is the ability to, in challenges, may they be in your personal life, may they be in looking for a career or a job, entrepreneurship, or all the other things. It became immensely helpful for me, spending about 10 years in there. And for those people watching us, Google it. Toastmasters, there are throughout North America, probably has been for the last 30, 40 years. And in Europe, that is Toastmasters. Most communities have it, and is very, very helpful. At least go down there. If you have challenges with that part, go down, visit, and you may find that for me, it changed my life. There's no question about that.
That's amazing. Yeah, I read I started out with reading a bunch of books and just practicing the things I learned. Also took a public speaking class in college, which was a good experience, and worked to continue developing those skills. I'm even going on podcasts, you continue to develop those skills. Hosting podcasts, I'm sure you've developed those skills further. So just putting yourself in situations where you can try and you realize even if you make a mistake, it's not a big deal. And you get over that fear and that discomfort. And then you can relax into the situation.
And again, that's why, if you look at just in a general sense, and that it's a changing world right now that we live in. The global world is becoming smaller and smaller. Obviously, we collectively have issues and challenges that over time kind of sort itself out again, hopefully. But in the meantime, it's a global world in all the things that we do. The regular news medias that we have in Europe, in Canada, Canadian Broadcasting Corporation in the United States, CNN, ABC's. We watch them all, but a lot of them there are a lot of advertisement, and it sometimes is tilting left, right, or wherever. That I believe the newspapers, the same, used to be different, are not as prominent now as they used to be. I believe the future lies in podcasting, like what we are doing here. I've never met you before, and there nearly for an hour we had a discussion about very, very important topics that are very, very much part of this world, and a real inspiration having somebody like yourself on our podcast where the whole world is watching. And I believe that social media, in particular podcasting, it's still in its infancy. It is expanding throughout the world. And what I've been doing, starting about 4 or 5 years ago when it was first blogging locally, then working with a television station here, doing local individuals that were of interest, interviewing them or have a discussion with them, and then I'd want from there on in, further. And then when podcasting came, we couldn't do that anymore. Did our own studio, and then from there on in, came to an organization, Podmatch, which we are now part of, and where we bring the whole globe together. So today I have a discussion with you. Tomorrow I maybe have somebody from the Philippines, maybe the following day from Greece. Who knows, but it's the future in my mind.
Absolutely. And social media has really expanded across areas and dimensions of our lives. And it doesn't include just the typical things we categorize as social media, but it's connected the world. And podcasting is a big part of that. YouTube has been a big part of that. And it's really made the world feel smaller, the more interconnected. And we can learn so much more today in such a short period of time compared to what was available before. The whole university's worth of knowledge is available on the internet.
Exactly. So just going back to where we started, because the 1 hour is we need to do more of this. We need to do it again because we got to know each other more now, but we have so many things in common that I like to and talk to Scott, stay in touch with you. I like to send you my books that I've done. I'll sign them all, and then maybe in 2, 3, 4, 5 months, or when you release your book, Trauma Transformed, that I can do another podcast with you. Or are you doing? Do you host a podcast, or do you have your own podcast? Or are you mainly
I do.
guesting?
Yeah, mainly guesting.
Yeah. Okay. So then I like to kind of bring you back, and as a guest again.
That would be terrific.
Dr. Patel, it was an amazing, amazing podcast again. Have you got potentially a website, how people can contact you or follow you?
People can find me on my LinkedIn. That would probably be the best way to find me.
Okay, and then for all those people watching us that like what we are doing in our podcast, is that share it with others, and make comments, and then at the same time, Dr. Patel, it was a pleasure and a privilege to have you on my podcast.
Likewise, it was a joy.
Thanks. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.